Let's talk first with Turquoise. I love that. In Michigan, I believe. Turquoise,
Hello.
welcome.
Hi. I actually just ran into your show this week, and I noticed there was a caller that named themselves Purple, so I guess I'll try to start a trend of people calling in with color names. So
I like that a lot.
Love it.
Great. So I wanted to call because forgive me, I didn't realize there was like a pre-chosen topic of some of the things that some binary trans people have to do with to try to blend in with a around here. So I guess,
no worries. We get calls about all topics.
Yeah, no, we'd love to hear what's on your mind.
Okay, yeah.
Absolutely.
So I have trouble understanding the concept of non-binary genders, and it's because basically the way I grew up is that gender was just a synonym for sex, biological sex, and basically I was always taught, and I always believed that it doesn't matter what your genotype or your phenotype is. You just shouldn't have to be bound to any sort of gender roles or you shouldn't be told what you're supposed to be interested in, or what your personality should be, those sorts of things. And then also when I learned about binary trans people, it didn't really bother me at all. I didn't see any problem with it. And I'm not implying that I necessarily see a problem with non-binary, like identifying as non-binary. I just don't understand, because I feel like it kind of goes against the idea of that that if there is does this mean that there is now, like, if we have to say that there are more than two genders, does that mean that we now have to prescribe what is considered feminine and masculine instead of just saying that you shouldn't put a label on yourself, or you shouldn't try to put yourself into a box?
Right. Yeah.
You use the word prescribe. I know V's going to come after you. Go for it.
No, I'm not that scary, I promise. No, so I think you've hit on a couple of really interesting points, and I want to just reassure you right off the bat. Non-binary gender is newer in the mainstream. Not, historically there have always been non-binary people, but in the mainstream it is a newer conversation. So it makes sense that there's a little bit more confusion and hesitation around that, especially because as humans we like boxes, right? We like to be able to put people into their box and understand where they go. And if someone wants to be in box A, like, okay, that makes sense. We can put them into box A. That's fine. But what about when they take the boxes away? What happens then? And at the risk of being very almost, what's the word? At the risk of being too simplistic about this, I would say reductionist, I suppose. I would say, think about ice cream. Right? For a very long time, imagine you grew up in a world where you only thought that chocolate and vanilla were the only flavors of ice cream. And sometimes you preferred one or the other, right? Maybe you only liked chocolate, or you only liked vanilla, or your whole family liked chocolate and you liked vanilla, or, and there's some tension there of, which one do you like and which one should you like and which one, all of that. But there's still like this contained either or situation, which makes it a little bit easier to have that conversation. Now imagine you go to a 31 flavors and suddenly you've got like pumpkin, cheesecake, caramel, coconut, and you're like, what is happening? I didn't know that these were flavor options. This is overwhelming. And yeah, it can be a little bit, but it's still ice cream, right? And there are people who prefer, pumpkin cheesecake, caramel coconut instead of chocolate or vanilla. And that doesn't mean that chocolate and vanilla are somehow less important or that they don't exist or that people who choose chocolate or vanilla are somehow less valid. It just means that we realize there are more options. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
I think it does. I guess what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to go at this from some sort of ontological from an ontological point of view or an epistemological point of view, because I guess it's like see like that's the thing, because I'm a cisgendered girl, and and the thing is, I always just consider myself, well, I'm a girl, but I've never felt any sort of gender dysphoria or gender euphoria. I've never felt anything where I could feel like I don't identify as a girl or a woman. So, but at the same time, it's like I don't sometimes I'm femme, but like other times I am. But like basically, I do not. Not only do I feel that I align with a lot of what people say a girl should act, but it also really depends on the environment too. Like right now I'm in Michigan, and the town that I'm in is a lot more. It doesn't really seem to care as much as where I grew up in Texas.
Right.
Because I guess it's like not only. So I guess it's I feel what I'm trying to figure out is like what standard do I go by?
Right. Exactly. Oh, good.
Yeah. What is gender? How do we measure it? How do we weigh it? What is the expectations that come along with it? Yeah.
If it's different in Michigan than Texas, how do you know? I love it.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's important to remember that we are social creatures, that it is baked into our DNA. It is part of our evolutionary history to be interacting with one another. And that idea of the looking glass self, that we are not just who we say we are, but to a certain extent or in a way, who other people see us as. And that's an important part of our identity. And that can become really oppressive. And we can talk all day about how being a woman doesn't mean that you have to abide by certain expectations and different things. But gender is really multifactorial, and it's not just about what other people tell us we should be. There is this very squishy, very difficult to define aspect of how we experience the world that we tend to clump together into this idea called gender, which is really, if anything, just a conglomeration of statistical data points. I mean, it really is just women tend to like this, and this. You may or may not give a shit about this, or this, but if you identify as a woman, you're more likely to line up with a lot of those points. And when you say, I am a woman, that's kind of what you're expressing. And the number of components that go into that is baffling and infinite, really, as we infinitely continue to create more and more experiences for people to interact with.
Okay, so I guess my question is how do we know for sure that there are indeed more? How do I know for sure? I should say, like, there are more than two genders, as opposed to gender should just be a synonym for sex, and we just have a lot of we just have the different trends in personality traits and likes and dislikes and trends and this and this and this. That
because it's a made-up human word.
Now we're getting into prescriptive versus descriptive.
Yeah, there it is. There it is.
That's exactly what I was wondering, because
exactly.
Sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, no, exactly.
Okay,
so Christy kind of hit the nail on the head. This is all made up. right? Every word, the word sex is made up, the word gender is made up. We agree that it's kind of, this is what it means for the purposes of conversation, for the purposes of research, for the purpose of history. We have agreements on what words mean, but those change over time, right? Like the word gay used to mean happy. And when people said I'm gay, you're like, oh, congratulations. And now people say I'm gay and people say congratulations for an entirely different reason. But we change the way words are used. And so what we're doing, in addition to challenging the notion that everyone needs to fit in one box or another, we're kind of saying, what do we call these boxes, right? So it's a social movement, but it also is a linguistic one. And the reason it's coming to the fore as much as it is because the internet has connected us and allowed us to adapt our language so quickly that it is causing a little bit of this, wait, what does this word mean? Wait, how are you using this? I just learned some really amazing acronyms the other day, TMA and TME, and I want to do an entire episode about it. But I had never heard of this before, and it turns out there are new words and new phrases that we're learning all the time. And for us, we're saying gender fits this category of things, and we're going to make a concerted effort to shift that definition. You're not behind. You're not working with wrong information when you say they're synonyms. They have been for a long time. What we're saying is we don't need two words for one thing, because we're realizing we are more complex than that. And so we're taking one of these words and we're rehabilitating it. We're using it in a different way, and we're encouraging people to come alongside that. Now, we can argue about whether it's better to do that or invent an entirely new word, but that presents its own issues when trying to get it to catch on. So yeah, there's a whole lot to unpack here, but the takeaway is words are made up. All of them, your name, my name, Christy's name, Billie's name, like everything is made up. And if enough of us agree that we can move in a direction that positively affects us, then we can change that.
Yeah, and I want to make some space for Billie to weigh in here in just a moment, but I want to point out that human beings do this all the time. This is just part of being a human. There's no such thing as the United States of America. There is no such thing as having bipolar disorder. Like, that's not anything specific or tangible that you can really point to that is this, but it's a descriptor that we use to describe a conglomeration of ideas. When we talk about somebody as having bipolar disorder, what we're really saying is they have a cluster of symptoms that statistically tend to go together. And when we lump all of these different symptoms into one particular box or into one particular person, it's useful to describe it with this term or with this idea. And gender works in the same way. I want to be mindful not to connect a disorder to the idea of gender, but also just to say that anytime you've gotten a medical or psychological diagnosis, we're taking all of the components that you as a human exist as, and then trying to come up with a cute little label that we can describe it with. And that's exactly what we're doing in these other ways.
I think I also want to kind of jump in as like as far as like a language shift. Used to, I can't remember exactly when. I think it was before the Norman Conquest '66. But the word "girl" used to mean just child, and "boy" meant servant. And then eventually this ended up shifting over to where "boy" meant boy, child. And it's like it's just like child, child, and then girl just meant the female child, because you would have, and the way they used to distinguish between boy and girl was like girl, and there's like knave girl, if I remember correctly, was boy. Like it's kind of weird, like everyone a little bit different. Like I'm trying to remember exactly, but there So it 1,000 years ago, everybody on this panel would have been a girl when they were a child. So
I like
it's kind of funny, but anyway.
Dropping some linguistics on V. I love the dunk. Thank you, Billie.
All right, Turquoise. How does that strike you? What are you thinking?
I guess I'm I'm definitely going to have to just listen over this call again, because I feel like there's there's a lot to take in, and there's just and I remember I'm not really sure if all my questions if my questions are answered, but there was a lot of things explained here. The reason I decided to call was because I used to say that people were just making up genders, and I'm trying to figure out and I think I'm just trying to because I've always respected people's pronouns, and I'm just concerned with it's kind of like what Matt Delany says. I want to believe as many true things and as least false things as possible. So I really want to be respectful of other people's identities, and at the same time, I just want to understand all of this.
For sure. And we did drop a whole lot of stuff on you, right? Yeah. all the way. We introduced linguistics and philosophy and all of these things into the conversation. So definitely give it a listen back and call back with any other thoughts you might have after listening to it. And maybe, hey, I didn't get this, or I disagree with this element. I do want to just make sure we are touching on this, and then we'll let you go, because I could talk about this all day. We are also making a descriptive claim, if that makes sense. So I know a lot of the time people are like, well, you don't believe God exists, but you believe that trans people exist. And why is that different? And the difference there is, I can tell you that non-binary people exist because, hi, I exist and I'm a non-binary person. And therefore, non-binary people exist, because it's a description of what I am. I'm not saying that non-binary as a concept exists as like its own entity out in space, that I'm tapping into. It's just a description of what I am. So yes, I love the instinct to go ask those questions, figure out the root of all of this and the scientific background. But I also want to make sure that we're differentiating between making a claim about how I describe myself and how enough people have described themselves to be like, yeah, this is a thing, versus making a claim about an ontological existent being outside of our realm of understanding.
Okay, that last part definitely clears some things up.
Oh, good. Wonderful. We got there. All right. Well, thank you so much for calling in, Turquoise. If you do have more questions, if you call back, I'd love to talk to you again.
Okay, that's great. Can I just ask one more question before I hang up?
Sure. Why not? Go for it.
What is TMA and TMI?
Oh, TMA and TME. Yes. I did drop that and then just left it. TMA is transmisogyny affected, and TME is transmisogyny exempt. And so there's this idea that there is a very specific kind of misogyny that is targeted at trans women and cis men who present, or non-binary people who present in a feminine way, that does not affect people who were assigned female at birth and then transition into a more masc identity. So I'm super excited to dive into that, but I do not have nearly enough information to weigh in on it at the moment.
Okay, sounds good. All right, thank you so much. Thank you very much. It was great. It was great talking to y'all.
Thank you. Bye.
Yeah.
Yeah, that moment when Turquoise was like, well, it sounds like people are making up genders. That's it. That's the whole call in one little morsel. They are. And there are 7 billion people on the planet, each one making up their own gender. But then we take all of those things that they make up and we start looking for the trend lines. We start looking for the through lines and the useful things to say that help describe and help clump and maybe order that data set a little bit.
Right. And I feel bad that we kind of led her around in this like really big circle. But when you call in and ask, please explain non-binary, at that point, there are multiple areas to attack, right? There are multiple ways to go at it, and a lot of people have different questions, and that one was a really good one. I think when we got down to it, how do you know that this exists? It exists because we say so, because that's what words are.
Because that's what words are.
That's what's words.